All right, welcome back into Cherry Picking. Today's episode, 2026 Olympic preview in Milan. This is the first real best-on-best Olympics, and even like hockey. I know we had the Four Nations last year in over a decade. Obviously, the last one being 2014 in Sochi, so like 12 years now. It's going to be chaos. Firstly, we have the whole clusterfuck with what the problems with what the ice was. It is done now, and it's ready for the women's tournament that it's going to start this week and all the games that are going to be going on there. And then the men's tournament, obviously, the next week. What do you think the first reaction of the players is going to be?
I think you're going to see more complaints or things brought up with the arena compared to the ice. Yeah, like I don't think you're initially going to see complaints with the ice or the bench or whatever, like the actual rink stuff. I don't think you're going to see. Maybe the dressing rooms, the showers, like all that extra stuff. You're probably going to see a little bit of a complaint with because of how rushed it was. And then you might see the complaints about the ice start to trickle in, later on in the tournament.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, there was a ton going on around the building of these rinks in Milan for this. The ice seems to be, from what I've read, pretty good. It is a little bit wider than like an NHL rink, which is like a lot of European rinks are, but it is 3 feet shorter in like distance. So I think we'll see probably a lot more goals, if I had to guess. In a shorter, smaller rink like that, like just less room to play, maybe more mistakes, and then speed will prove to be a little bit more
I think it's definitely something interesting because if you were to look at all the, obviously, Olympics we have, or that we've had since, really hockey. You go back to Vancouver, obviously has ranks. Sochi, Russia, obviously has ranks. Pyeongchang has ranks. So we never really had to deal with this, but now here it is, and it seems like we're out of the thick of it, but we'll see what happens when the players finally hit the ice.
I agree. I think the fans will be complaining the most. Like, think about it. Like, growing up playing hockey in Canada or the U.S. or all over Europe, for some of these guys, like, they've played in bad rinks where the boards are weirdly high or there's no glass on the boards. It's something else. Like, that part won't be too bad for the players. I think that'll be fine. And now looking at the teams in the tournament, I know Russia obviously isn't involved, which is kind of a shame because of just the talent that they're missing out on in the Olympics. But this might be the most talented Olympics I think we've seen because I don't think it's like that obvious that Canada and Sweden can win. Like all these other countries have close the gap with Canada and USA over the years.
Yeah, I think what's more impressive is the bottom teams where you're starting to see like true depth talent. I mean, look at Germany alone. I think they have 7 or 8 players from the NHL alone and like actual players, not these guys that are jumping in a lineup. Switzerland, obviously, their defense, their top 3 defense are absolutely great. Denmark has good players. Like there's teams in there that actually are providing NHL talent. Which is really good to see.
Yeah, so we have obviously Canada and the U.S. You have Sweden, Finland, Czechia, Switzerland, Germany are like teams that are contending. I don't know if you can necessarily include Switzerland and Germany, but maybe you can.
Yep.
And then the last 4 teams who won't be that competitive, I'd imagine, Slovakia, Latvia, Denmark, and Italy and France. Will definitely not. Italy will definitely not be. I don't think they have one NHL player.
No, I do actually have an OHL player I recognize. Tommy Perdaller played with my cousin in Peterborough, but he's the only guy that comes off the top of my head.
All right, let's start off by talking about obviously the 2 juggernauts in this event, Canada and USA. Looking at their roster, who do you think is the biggest snub at this point? Like we have Sam Bennett, who obviously comes in for Cirelli. I think that would have been the biggest snub. But now, who are you looking at?
Like it's such a chalk answer, and I wanted to see it, and I fought hundreds of people on it. I still think it's Connor Bedard.
Yeah.
We've seen him come back from injury, and he's been tearing it up. I mean, some of the goals he's scoring aren't just goals; like they're highlight reel goals. He's one of the best players in the league. Definitely not on this team. If you want to start mentioning like positionally where he would play up and down the lineup, I can still I get that side of the argument, but to me he is the biggest snub.
And then for the U.S. team, like I think for the U.S. team it's easier because Bill Guerin seemed to pick a team more like what we saw with the World Juniors team 2 years ago, where it's like I'm building a roster, not just like an all-star team.
Yeah.
And you're leaving off Cole Caulfield and Jason Robertson. Who do you think, and Adam Fox? Who do you think out of those 3 is the most deserving to be there?
My bias would lean towards Fox, but he is hurt, so I'll kind of stray away from that. I honestly would think it's Cole Caulfield.
Yeah, especially how he's playing recently.
Yeah, like you want to, ever shut down a guy who's scoring at the rate he's scoring at and the goals he's scoring. Like it doesn't make sense to leave off these high-end actual goal scorers. You want to leave off a guy like Jason Robertson who's going to put up 110 points this year. I don't agree with it.
Yeah.
Maybe you can kind of lean it away. It's going to be a tighter game, a harder check game, whatever. But why are you eliminating goal scoring? It's going to come down to that. We all know that. There's better, these are the best goalies in the world. I don't get eliminating goal scoring. I think Cole Caulfield's the biggest.
Yeah, I would probably go with that as well. I think it's interesting. Obviously, Adam Fox not being there. But Jason Robertson, Cole Caulfield, I think you have a good argument for either of those teams, but either of those players. But obviously, Bill Guerin thinks they're a little too one-dimensional. Looking at USA and Canada, and you're seeing the rosters pop up on your screen, there hasn't been Olympic hockey for 12 years, right? I think it's good to look at maybe some of these NHL players that missed their Olympic window. So for Canada, us looking at old Canadian players or current NHLers who did miss it. I think Logan Couture stands out, obviously. Steven Stamkos is a big one. Could maybe argue Mark Scheifele, but I think that's a little bit on the lower end. Tavares, and then honestly, you brought this one up, and I think it's really interesting to bring up because this was at his peak. Jonathan Huberdeau.
Yeah, I think he's interesting because of the 1 year he had. I think he was kind of like a 50, 60, 70-point guy hanging around. He was a good player. Maybe he wasn't like a true top candidate to go, but then he comes out of nowhere and has a 115-point season that 1 year he did, which was the 2022 Olympic year. We know how much it goes into a season. The single season alone. I mean, you look at Macklin Celebrini, right? Yeah. I don't think many people had him making the team a year ago. You might have had it just as conversation based because he was first overall pick. But sitting in this year, he's kind of forces himself on the way to the team. I think Huberdeau was a great example for that and probably would have made his way on that team.
And then looking at the U.S. side, I think one of the more glaring ones is definitely, obviously, Johnny Gaudreau. And then a goalie, John Gibson, definitely never got his time with the Olympic team. And then maybe even Chris Kreider, who I know we played on the Four Nations team. But those are a few guys on the U.S. side that definitely missed their window as well.
Yeah, I think obviously Ranger bias again, like I said, but Chris Kreider also scored 54 goals or 52 goals the same year as the 2022 Olympics. I think he probably would have been the staple there, especially since he was on the Four Nations as well. Obviously, Gaudreau, unfortunate situation, he probably would have made a case to be on this team. I think maybe towards the tail end of his career still, but and John Gibson's an interesting one because the U.S., you look at these three goalies, they're really recent goalies, right? I mean, I think Ottinger and Swayman were both drafted after 2018. True. Maybe Swayman earlier. Hellebuck's been there for a little bit longer, but other than like Gibson, maybe it was just, I mean, Jonathan Quick's the only real name that comes to my mind, so John Gibson definitely missed that gap.
Now, looking at these two teams, we mentioned that at the beginning of the video that it's not that obvious that one of these two teams is going to win gold. So looking at Canada, what do you think their biggest weakness is?
I mean, I think everyone kind of sees as a glaring issue. It is the goaltending.
Like, even after, like, I know last year I think that was 100%.
Yeah.
But even going into this year with Logan Thompson,
Now, the only reason I bring this up, too, is Logan Thompson's obviously dealing with an injury right now. Darcy Kemper, probably 3 weeks ago, left the game against the Rangers, actually, with an injury. I know he's healthy now, but stuff like that lingers. Binnington, I know he's been better in the tail end of 2026, but he hasn't been... You don't look at him and you go, that's my guy. Maybe in, like, the final when you're like, this guy's just a dog when it matters, fine, I can get behind that. But there is probably going to be games where Canada's going to have to just take over offensively, which we know they can do, but it still is their largest issue in my mind.
And then USA's biggest weakness, in your opinion?
I said the defense as a whole. The reason I say that is because I still look at their depth and I sit there and I go, well, if you're going to have, Clayton Keller as a third line checking role. True. Is Jack Hughes your third C? I don't really see that. JT Miller has been disgusting this year. Is he going to slot in the lineup? Brock Nelson I know is really good, but is it a product of Colorado being really good? Like, there's lots of questions that come into mind when Billy G really wants to push this hard-nosed, hard to play against, like bottom six kind of guys. And then those guys just don't fit it. I think they're protected by guys like Larkin, like guys like Tage Thompson. Vincent Trocheck probably fits that role a little bit. But I don't know if I look at that bottom six and really sit there and go, well, how are you going to go up against a line of, Marchand, Wilson, and Bennett? Yeah. Are you really going to out-battle them? Probably not. So the U.S. is a really good team. Not obviously going to argue that. But their defense as a whole does scare me. They do have a really good back end, probably the best back end in the tournament. But trying to pinpoint a weakness isn't the easiest thing to do with that squad, so I just think their defense is
when you're building, obviously, these all-star teams or whatever super teams from these countries, it is hard to pick out the weakness. But, like, I would even say to a certain degree, and it's crazy to say because there's so many good guys on this U.S. team, but, watch U.S. go into this Olympics event and not score as much as they thought they were going to, or as much as they did against Finland and Sweden in the Four Nations. Like, they did lose to Sweden in the Four Nations round robin. Now, I know they sat a couple players, and a couple players were hurt because they were getting them ready for the semis and the finals against Canada. But still, you did lose to Sweden. Canada beat Sweden in overtime as well. Mm-hmm. So I think finding out these teams' weaknesses are obviously going to be important, and who knows if it changes on like a little bit of a smaller ice now that we go to Italy here. Unsung heroes for these two teams, so guys that I think or you think would maybe people wouldn't put the spotlight on immediately, but someone who could by the end of the term be like, wow, this guy actually could win, like, let's say, Olympic MVP. I
think a lot of people have seen it this year with how good he's been, but for Canada, I'm definitely going with Brad Marchand. I think he's the easiest guy to probably slot in anywhere throughout the lineup. I mean, 50 points in 47 47 games, I believe, 25 apiece. He's really taken over with the unavailability of Tkachuk and Barkov for the Panthers this year. I know they're probably swinging away from a playoff spot, but he has been really good. I don't think there's any denying that. He was also a guy probably people had left off this team and just played his way onto it. I think he's a guy you could see really jump up.
Yeah, for the Canadians, I'm going, I know, look, like Conn Smythe winner, but he was left off the team in the initial pick, and it was Sam Bennett. I think he is going to be like a fire lit under his ass getting into this tournament kind of last minute. I saw that he was making all these flight changes for his family to make sure they are in Italy because they originally booked the flights thinking he would make the team and then they canceled them. So I think he's going to be really motivated to have a really good tournament to prove to Canada, be like, you're not leaving me off this team again if I get another opportunity. And then for the U.S., who do you have? This
might not sit well with a lot of people, but I still think Zach Werenski is not looked at as a top U.S. defenseman. I know he's probably, next to Makar in Norris voting this year, but I think with Columbus kind of, they're a good team, but not really like they're probably not going to make the playoffs. And then you still have McAvoy, you still have Quinn Hughes that are going to lead the way from him. I think he's a guy who can come in and just tear this tournament apart. I think he could even compete for Quinn Hughes to lead that power play one if that power play one doesn't really, stay successful at the start of the year. Maybe not the best pick for an unsung hero because of how good we know he is, but I think he's a guy people are going to really, really get a hold of in this tournament.
Yeah, and I think one big name we forgot for the U.S. snub list is Lane Hudson as well. We didn't mention him. He definitely could have been on this team too. I don't hate that take about Zach Werenski at all. I'm going to go with a guy who was left off the Four Nations team last year and is having a great year this year with Buffalo, and it's Tage Thompson. Like, what if he is that extra spark that they need physically and goal scoring wise to, maybe jump Canada or whatever it may be, or whatever situation it may be. I think Tage Thompson is going to be a huge addition to this team. Obviously not a huge surprise with how good of a goal scorer he's been in the NHL for the last 3 or 4 years. Let's move on to the teams that fall right behind Canada and the U.S., and that is Sweden and Finland. If you're looking at the odds, Canada and U.S. obviously heavily favored. Sweden right around 6-7-1, and then Finland 11-12-1, and then it gets a little further after that. But these two teams, like I said, very decently competitive at the Four Nations. Finland wasn't too competitive. Yeah. But the way they play, do you think that will have any sort of advantage against these players? I know they play against each other all the time, but when you have a full Sweden team that's playing the exact same way, coached by, someone who's coaching in Europe all the time and has maybe a little bit of a different strategy than North American hockey, do you think that will help them in this tournament?
I think for sure to an extent. A lot of these players, they play in these leagues growing up till they're 20 years old, and then they immediately jump over to American. They're playing with people from different countries. Whereas in Canada, when you're playing junior hockey, even in the States, you're only playing with Canadians and Americans. Whereas these players are having to switch languages when they talk on the ice, all sorts of stuff. When you go back to your home country and there is not one bit of rust or a jump that you have to get over in order to communicate with these players and just play alongside them, I think that really does play into it.
Yeah, I think Sweden this year, and they are missing a couple guys that would have been so key. Having Jonas Brodin on that back end would help so much when you're playing teams like Canada and the U.S. and the firepower they have. So I think that hurts them a little bit. But Jesper Wallstedt, Philip Gustafsson, Jacob Markstrom, that is a great tandem of three goalies. Yeah. Better than it was last year as well. Finland's goalies aren't that great, I will say. Korpisalo, Lankinen, Saros. I don't see a ton of confidence in that. But Finland does have some players on the back end that I think can limit some of these teams offensively, and maybe they win a low-scoring battle in some of these ways. Who is a player on either Sweden and Finland that you're kind of looking out for to point out to people, be like, hey, watch this guy. He's going to make a difference when they play U.S. and Canada.
Yeah, again, biased, but Sweden, for sure, Mika Zibanejad. I think the reason I bring this up is the Rangers have been so bad this year. Zibanejad was a guy who got a lot of slack last year. People kind of counted him out. If somebody were to trade for Zibanejad or sign him at 8.5 right now as a 2C, people would be over the moon to have that guy. If their power play is going to connect, it's probably going to have to not run through him, but he's going to be a major thing in that. Solely the idea that he has experience, especially successful experience in international play, scored the game winner in 2010 for the Swedish World Junior team against Russia, their only World Junior goal before this year. I think he's a guy who can really impact the bottom of the lineup. I think there are people slot ahead of him. If he does play wing, he's going to be behind Nylander. He's going to be behind Forsberg. He's going to be behind those guys. He's also a big body, and he's been playing a lot of more physical this year with the introduction of Sullivan's system. So he's a guy I think people are going to recognize that he still has it.
Okay, I'm going a little bit of a different route here. I'm going with Pontus Holmberg just because he has been, since he's been on the Tampa Bay Lightning, one of the better shutdown defensive centers in the league. And I think that's huge when you're going into this tournament, knowing that US and Canada are the powerhouses. Like, can you have a line that shuts down a McDavid line or a Nathan McKinnon line? Like, I know that's obviously a massive task to put onto one person, but him with a couple other players around him, I think that kind of needs to be their strategy to kind of take a line out of it and make Canada beat them with like Bennett or Marchand or Tom Wilson scoring these goals. So I think Pontus Holmberg is going to be very important for Sweden. And then for Finland, I'm going a similar route. Esa Lindell is probably the best defensive defenseman in the NHL, if not top 3. He's the best penalty killer in the NHL.
Yeah.
Jay Gottinger has continually said this as his goalie. I think I would trust him playing in front of him all the time, or behind him, I guess you should say. So Esa Lindell, I think, is also crucial because he's going to be a guy who's going to have to stop the top players on Canada and the U.S.
Yeah, for Finland, I went with maybe a little bit more of kind of a known guy in Mikael Granlund. The reason I went with him is because if he does by chance play center, I know you can obviously slot him to the wing as well. He's done that before. He did that in Dallas last year. But if he does play center, someone's going to really have to take over for the loss of Barkov. Don't know if it's him. Obviously, you have Aho. Obviously, you have Rupi Hintz. But still, someone's going to have to fill that role. I believe he's done it. He was really good in the Four Nations. I think he had 4 points in those 3 games for Finland. So he's a guy who can step in. He's been pretty good for Anaheim this year. Good veteran experience. So I would look out for him.
Yeah, Finland not having Alexander Barkov is obviously a huge loss. Blow. Like a top 3 center in the NHL in terms of how he plays both ends of the ice. So that will definitely be a huge test for this Finnish team to battle without their top player in years, I would say. All right, looking at now the other teams a part of this tournament. I would say these teams are all pretty much long shots, but I think there are always teams that can surprise us. So out of Switzerland, Germany, Czechia, and Slovakia, who is the team that you think will either make it to the bronze medal game or just make some noise after the round robin?
My team is Germany, and the reason I did this is because I believe their division is the easiest.
Okay.
I believe it's US, Denmark, Germany, and Latvia.
Yeah.
So realistically, Germany should get past Latvia and Denmark for that second spot. Now, could they make a run for Germany or for the US? Sorry. Possibly. I mean, they do have high-end talent on the team. Obviously, you're probably gonna have a first line of something like Draisaitl, Stützle, and Peterka. Yeah. That's nasty. You have Seider on the back end to kind of hold it down. He's really good. And the biggest thing of them all, I think, is Grubauer.
Yeah,
he's been unbelievable this year. Having a legit NHL goalie in net is a huge thing for this team. Obviously, he's older, but that doesn't matter. He's been really good. So Germany for me is a team to look out, especially with the weaker division and their high-end talent.
Yeah, I went a little bit of a longer shot with Switzerland. I just think Switzerland is one of the more balanced teams. I also think they have a really good group of players who are already playing in Europe as well, like the non-NHL players. But you have Timo Meier, Roman Josi, Nino Niederreiter. Like the list, Nico Hischier. The list goes on and on.
Yeah.
The one thing is kind of what you mentioned with Philipp Grubauer, which is why I like the Germany pick. I think their best goalie is probably Akira Schmid.
Yeah.
And then I think, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but an older Swiss goalie who played in the NHL for a bit and is now playing in Europe. So that would be the only deterrent of me like not actually putting my faith into Switzerland, but I do like Switzerland in this tournament to maybe surprise a couple people and win some games they're not supposed to win.
Yeah.
An unsung hero from these European teams that people can kind of look out for in the same way we talked about Sweden and Finland.
So I went probably way off the board on this, non-NHL player, but former one, Dominic Kubalik, played for the Red Wings, played for the Blackhawks, actually scored 30 goals with the Blackhawks one year, 20 with Detroit. I was kind of shocked when I don't want to say got blackballed is not the right word, but kind of like given up on by a lot of NHL teams. I know he wasn't great defensively. I think there was a little bit of like interior stuff that he wasn't great with, but he's going to be back playing with NHL players. I think he's a guy you could slide into the top 6 for sure. The Czechs have some older players that might not really like stand out to get time in the top 6. Andre Palat, I know, has been okay for the Islanders since he got traded, but overall not the best player. So I think he's a guy who can slide up, maybe play with the Pasternak, maybe play with the Zacha, someone who could really score some big goals for the Czechs.
Yeah, I'm going with the guy who, similar reasons I picked my picks for Sweden and Finland, and kind of like a younger vocal leader for this Swiss team, and I think one of the more underrated Swiss players who plays in the NHL, and that's JJ Moser, who plays for the Tampa Bay Lightning. Yeah. He's their best defenseman, in my opinion. I know Victor Hedman's been out for pretty much the entire year, but his stats defensively have been unreal this year. He's top 5 when he's on the ice in terms of limiting scoring chances, high danger chances. Like, that's exactly what you need when you're playing Connor McDavid, Nathan McKinnon, Sidney Crosby, and all these other players. So I think JJ Moser might surprise some people. Also, he has some really good offensive upside, especially at 5-on-5, not even just the power play, because obviously I think Roman Josi will probably be on the back end for the power play for this Swiss team. So JJ Moser is the guy I'm going with out of these group of 4. We don't really need to talk about Italy or France, Latvia, not really, because they won't put up too much of a fight. If you look at the odds, they're actually quite comical when they're playing some of these US, Sweden, and Canadian teams. But our final medal predictions for the 2026 Olympic hockey, what do you have?
I have Canada in the gold over Sweden, Finland in the bronze, winning, I'll say over the US probably, but 1, 2, 3, Canada, Sweden, Finland.
Okay, so I have Canada beating Sweden as well. Kind of boring that we both have the same 1 and 2, but my third team is the U.S., and I think they're going to beat Switzerland in a very close game. I think the Czechs, both of us not saying the Czechs, so they'll probably be the closest team to these upper echelon of the 4 of Finland, Sweden, U.S., and Canada. But I think these medal predictions aren't too crazy, very realistic. There is a pretty big margin when you're looking at, or gap between, let's say,
5 and
5 and the rest of these teams. So I like these medal predictions, but that is the 2026 Olympics in a nutshell for the most part here. All the rosters, the best teams, players to look out for, kind of these final medal predictions. Let us know how you think the 2026 Olympics will go. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you guys next time.